subscribe.
Hi everybody and welcome. My name's Alison, the online piano and the online violin tutor. Today is a video on acoustic versus electric violin. So I'm going to be going over a few kind of pros and cons for each, what the benefits are and all that kind of thing for each of them, the differences in sound and all that sort of thing. I'm basically sort of comparing the two, and then what I might do is just give you my opinion of what I think of them anyway. I'll let you hear some sound clips of them as well. So I'm going to start with the electric violin. This is my Ted Brewer electric violin. This is a Vivo 2 in clear. It's a 4-string electric violin. You can get 5-string electric violins, but I just prefer to stick to the good old-fashioned traditional 4-string violin. The functions that you've got on here, it's got LED lighting. I don't know if you can probably see that lighting up. I'll play it. I can perhaps just play it in a minute for you, and you'll see it sort of lighting up. It's got sort of an LED sensitivity, so the harder you play, the more the LEDs come up. So it's quite a good, cool little function there. It's not the reason why I bought it, but it's just a cool little function. You can also adjust the volume of the violin here as well, of course, as you would say on an iPod, but you can also adjust it on the amp or on the desk setting that you've got. This is a really, really nice violin. You'll hear it in a minute. As far as electric violins go, I really, really like Ted Brewer electric violins. Ted Brewer I'll put a link to him in the description box underneath, but he's based in the UK and he's developed these violins. He does a few of them. He has things like the Hades and the Crossbow. I think he makes them to order anyway. But as far as electric violins go, a lot of famous electric violinists tend to use this violin. It does produce, in my opinion, a really, really good authentic violin sound. A lot of electric violins can sound a bit, they can just sound a bit naff really. They can always sound a little bit kind of like a muted version of a violin, or very saxophony. Some people have likened it to sort of similar, if you like, to the sound of a saxophone. But as far as a violin sound goes, this is really, really nice, and the electronics inside are really good. I did have a problem with the transformer about a year ago. I sent it back to Ted. He sorted it out, no problem for me. So it's actually made of acrylic. It's very light as far as electric violins go. It doesn't sort of have a body itself, as you can see. You can still attach a shoulder rest to this from the two little side bits here that you have, but you all know that I don't use a shoulder rest anyway, so that doesn't really apply. And as far as it being comfortable goes, it is very, very comfortable. I really like the chin rest on here. Normally, you know me, I like my thinner chin rest, but this one's really, I've not had to do anything with this. He's got dominant strings on this that just come as it's just a beautiful, beautiful instrument. I love it. A bit of reverb, and you're playing in a big arena, a big event, and it is just a beautiful violin. I really, really like it. So I would really recommend these ones. Bridge violins are also another good set of violins. I honestly haven't played on a bridge violin. But they are a little bit more sort of traditional looking, I believe, than these ones. But like I say, I haven't played on them, but they're another good popular choice for electric violins. You do need to pay a little bit of money for them though. So with violins, electric violins especially, you get what you pay for. If you can get them for about £100, but they're very, very heavy, they're very cumbersome, they're very uncomfortable to play. When you plug them in, they just don't sound very nice. So it's like anything electrical, buy cheap, buy twice. So if you are serious, then it is worth investing in a nice electric violin. I think these are about £800. I want to say, I could be wrong on that, but I think these are about £800. You can get them in America. I'll put the links to everywhere where you can get them from underneath so you can have a look. So this is the electric violin. So the good thing about having an electric violin is that you can plug it in. So there's a little wire here. You need an instrument jack here that goes into, I've got an amp down here by the side of me, so I'm hoping it doesn't blow my speaker on the camera out here and it's not too loud for you. So you'll need to plug it in, but once you've plugged it in, you can be very, very loud. So hopefully you can hear that. I have put a little bit of reverb on it as well, so You don't get any feedback like you can sometimes do with instruments. If I was to mic up my acoustic violin, you're obviously getting the sound from all the other mics and everything going through the microphone that's on my violin, so you sometimes have to be a little bit careful about feedback. But because this is just going straight into an instrument, there's no mics as such involved in it. It's picking it all up from the electronics inside, so there's no feedback to worry about. You can get a nice tone control, so if you're recording or you're at a mixing desk and you're at a gig, you can have more top end, more bottom end, you can make it sound a little bit more tinny, a bit thicker, a bit more velvety, a bit more richer. However you want to make it sound, you can play around with your treble and your basses and, you know, and all that kind of middle tones, all that sort of thing. So you have the luxury of doing more of that than you do on the acoustic violin. You can also get some really super cool effects, which I shall demonstrate in a minute for you, but you can have like, you can have pedals, you can put it into a looping machine, you can have wah, you can have distortion, you can put one of these little pedals to it as well. So this is a Boss. It's a distortion DS1, so you need to plug this into the mains, or it does run on a battery as well. And then you plug this into your amp, and then you can just operate the distortion on off by having it just, you put it on the floor and you just operate it on and off with your foot, so you can have it sounding literally like an electric guitar. But I shall show you what the distortion sounds like in a minute. But all I will say at the moment is that distortion on the electric violin is so beyond cool. Trust me, it's really good. Oh, one more thing about this as well is that it's really good for private practice. You can't really get much of a sound out of this. I've just unplugged this now, and if I just play something for you. So it does sound, you can still hear it, but it sounds really muted. But trust me, nobody outside this room is going to be hearing anything that I play. The only problem is that you can't really practice on this sound because it's not a great sound. So all you would need to do is just plug some headphones into the back of this. There is a headphone socket here as well. So plug some headphones, either your iPod headphones, anything like that, or some bigger headphones, plug them in the violin, switch the violin on, and then the sound that technically you hear coming out of an amp or a speaker will be what you get in the headphones. So they are really good for silent practice. You can get an ultra practice mute for the acoustic violin, but I would say this probably mutes a little bit more. You can get completely silent violins that are even more silent than these. I've played on a few Yamaha ones in the past. So they are even more silent than this, and you will need headphones for that. So as far as private practice quietly goes, they're brilliant. Okay, so going on with the regular bog standard acoustic violin, there are no wires to plug in, so you just get out the case, play and go. I would say that this is mainly suited for classical stuff. You can do a lot of kind of newer stuff. David Garrett does a lot of stuff. He does it very well on his Stradivarius violin. But this is one thing, I prefer playing my classical stuff on my acoustic violin than I do on the electric violin, just because it has the sound better suited for this. So basically this will play everything. This will play all genres, but the electric violin will play all genres. I think it will sound better with all genres or more modern music rather than classical music, but that's just my personal opinion, just because I'm very old-fashioned, I'm very old school. I do like the traditional sound of the old classical violin. You can't beat it. You can get a lot more out of the violin than you can out of an electric violin in a classical term. So for my opinion there, I think this, I would always play this if I was doing a classical recital. If I was going to do a gig, or I've been booked for a corporate event, then I would have the electric violin out, and I'd have a lot more fun on the electric violin with that sort of thing, as you've probably seen on some of my other videos that I've put on here before. I find this a little bit easier to play just because I think this is a little bit lighter. If you've got a nice violin, they are slightly made, they are made a little bit nicer because they're made out of wood, especially if you've, especially if they've been crafted very nicely as well. If you do have a very nice violin that you've invested in, you'll see some nice craftsmanship. So the feel of it is ever so delicate, and it will be much nicer. So that's one thing that I do miss from my electric violin, that this is much nicer. But then I wonder whether it's just because I play this a lot more anyway, so I'm a lot more used to this. Compared to my electric violin, I don't play it nearly as often as I do with this one, because obviously this is my go-to violin, because if I play the electric, I've got to faff around trying to plug it all in and all that sort of thing. Like I said before, you need to spend good money on electric violin. £100 for electric violin, that's going to say it all really. Like I said, my Ted Brewer was about 800, I think. You can spend anything from 500 and upwards on an acoustic violin, but again, acoustic violins are a little bit different. You don't have to necessarily spend as much money on them as you do with the electric violins, because a lot of it goes down to personal taste. So I could spend £20,000 on an acoustic violin and I could still prefer my £500 violin, for example. So it completely depends. They do sound ever so slightly different from each other. So this has more of an acoustic sound. Obviously that's got a more electric sound. I know that sounds very obvious, but I've got a few clips that you can hear in a moment that I've recorded so that you can hear the difference between the two. But depending on what I was doing, whether I was playing a classical recital or I was playing a gig or corporate event with the lights and lasers and all that kind of thing and the really cool backing tracks, depending on what I was doing would depend on what violin I would actually go for. So it completely depends. So in terms of what instrument you should start with, I recommend that you actually start with an acoustic violin, simply because I think they are much easier to play. You don't have to plug anything in, so when you're practicing you can just pick it up and go, rather than having to faff around trying to plug everything in, and it kind of puts you off practicing. If you're worried about the noise and everything, you can get an ultra practice mute. They're just big rubber things that go over the bridge. Now they do mute the violin quite a lot, but I mean it depends on how much you want to mute the violin. If you really want to mute the violin because you've got paper thin walls, then maybe an electric violin might be the best thing for you, and stick some headphones on and have a go. But of course when you've got the headphones on you can't always hear backing tracks if you're playing to them, so try and have one of these, use the ultra practice mute. Then if that doesn't work, then you can invest in an electric violin. But if you're going out and about, you won't be able to take the electric violin with you. So if you're playing as part of a school ensemble, then they won't be able to accommodate the electric violin, so this is where one of these comes in handy as well. So it is completely up to you. I would recommend that you get one of these first, because I think for the same amount of money you'll get a much better violin acoustically than you will with an electric violin. Plus you have to buy amps as well, and and then you're talking a whole different game. So what I'm going to play for you now are two examples, two audio files that I've recorded earlier on today. Now I'm playing exactly the same thing. I'm playing the first few bars or so of Canon in D, Pachelbel's Canon in D. And I'm going to play it first, or you're going to hear it first on the acoustic violin, and then I'll let you hear the recording on the electric violin. I've played exactly the same thing, exactly the same speed. They were both recorded in exactly the same way, exactly the same time, one after the other, and I have put a little bit of reverb on each of them just so it doesn't sound too dry, otherwise I don't think it would be a true representative of the sound. But I've put the same amount of reverb on each of them. So first of all you'll hear the acoustic violin recording, and then you will hear the electric violin recording. So I'll put those on now for you. So those were the acoustic and the electric version of the same song, so hopefully you can hear the difference and draw your own conclusions from that. They do sound very different. You can always tell an acoustic from an electric because acoustic does have a lot more of a brighter kind of ringy sound, you know, because you've got the acoustic sound of the strings when they're ringing. When I pluck them now, you can hear them ringing. You don't necessarily get that on the electric violin because the sound is electric, so it's you know, it's running through cables and wires and that sort of thing. So what I'm going to do now is pick up my electric violin. I've got an amp down here next to me and I'll play it so that you can hear the sound of it in the room. You've all heard how the acoustic violin sounds in the room, but I gave you the audio files so that you could hear, you could have a proper recording, you can have a proper listen to what the two are going to sound like. So now I'll play the electric violin in the room. I'll just mess around with that and I'll try it on a few different things like delay and reverb, and I'll put some distortion on there as well so you can hear what it's going to sound like. There are some really cool benefits to having an electric violin, but I'd say save the electric violin for just when you get off kind of the beginner level on the violin. So you'll find it much easier to learn on an acoustic violin than you will on an electric violin, and not only that, you'll just be completely sidetracked by all the really cool things that you can do. I might do a video on looping one day as well with the electric violin, but that's a whole other video and I could just spend hours and hours and hours doing really cool stuff. Oh, sorry, cool stuff with the electric violin and things. So I hope that's kind of helped a little bit, electric versus acoustic violin, and given you a little taste as to how each of them sounds and how they differ, pros and cons and that kind of thing. So thanks very much for watching and I'll catch you all next time.
Subscribe.